Well, praise the Lord, everyone. This is Elder Adrian Heyman. I'm continuing a series on Back to Basics, and one of the basic concepts in this particular age is sin. And what I'm doing, I'm dealing with sin, or what constitutes sin specifically throughout the ages. We did sin, of course, in the age of innocence, or dispensation of innocence, where essentially men became aware, but that didn't stop him from sinning. Then in the era of human conscience, since it was already warped, men could not hope to ascend to the level that God needed him to be. After the flood came human government, which essentially led to people, instead of scattering and going throughout the world as the commandment of the Lord was, they stayed together through some hope of reaching to heaven to defying his orders, defying God's orders, if he should send another flood. So that kind of told you that, number one, they did not believe God when he said that I won't destroy the world by a flood again. And they thought that, just like Satan earlier, that we would take it upon ourselves to counter that particular action. Now we're dealing with sin in the age of the dispensation of promise. And this is where actually things get very interesting, because we are prone to say the dispensation of promise as involving the entire world, when, to be honest, it only involved one man and his descendants, up through the time where his descendants became a sizable nation that was nevertheless enslaved. But what constituted sin for the people who actually operated under this promise? And remember, it was essentially the idea that Abram was supposed to leave his father's house and to come to a land that was promised to him. And as much as we believe Abram, which became Abraham, who is also listed as the father of faith, because his faith in stepping out when there was no tangible promise except what was given by God. And that was extremely commendable. And Abraham is known as the father of the faithful. On the other hand, there were sins that he and his descendants committed that, if they would have followed Christ thoroughly, would have alleviated some of the things that have happened even unto now. It's not to disparage Abraham or Isaac or Jacob, because these were the patriarchs that formed the forefathers of the Israelite people. But at the same time, we cannot excuse, because the Bible doesn't excuse what they did wrong. Now, one of the things that he did was essentially, you got to remember, Abraham was the one to whom God promised. It wasn't Lot. I'm not saying that that Abraham disobeyed God when he took Lot with him, but Lot was essentially he obviously the Lord wasn't going to send his seed through Lot, and Lot's actions actually showed where his mind was. Because as they left their father, Abraham's father's house, and Abraham took care of his nephew Lot, when Lot's herdsmen began to strive with Abraham's herdsmen, Abraham had to be the one to suggest, you make a choice, Lot. And Lot, of course, chose the land around the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. They were well watered, but the people there were exceedingly sinful. Could Abraham have possibly had more room for his flocks if Lot wasn't there? Possibly. And you have to also remember, from Lot, through his hasty retreat from Sodom just before the city and Gomorrah got destroyed by God, that there were some very shady things that happened to Lot involving his daughters. And because of their ideas of there's no man that's going to help us, not knowing that could Lot have went to another city and they could have found somebody? Yes. But they were desperate and they allowed their flesh to get the best of them. So they made Lot drunk. And you have to understand, when you get imbibed, or when you imbibe alcohol, when you ingest alcohol, more than likely, that's exactly what happened to Noah. You have no idea of what's taking place with you. Understand why people do take alcohol. They take it not to make more sense of the situation. They take it so that they have lesser inhibitions, lesser blocks that they put mentally to stop them from doing things. When those blocks are gone, they can do some pretty strange, wild, and sometimes dangerous things. In Lot's case, his daughters made him drink wine. And because of the amount that he took, he had no idea that both of his daughters had sex with him because of their desire to have descendants. One was the mother, you may say, of the Moabites, and the other was the mother of the Ammonites. And those two became fixtures in the land of Canaan and caused Israel no small amount of trouble. If Lot hadn't been there, if Lot wasn't taken with Abraham, that's one people that Israelites would not have had to deal with. You would say, well, that's unfair. Who would have known that? That's true. Who would have known that? But you see how a selfish desire to get the best land, coupled with falling to intoxication, sets the groundwork for future strife. Which the same thing happened with Abraham himself. When he lost faith in what God could do because of his advancing age and thought he'd help God, or his wife thought he would help God, but Abraham made no, he didn't make any, what do you call it? He didn't make any protesting about that. He didn't protest it. Instead, Abram allowed Sarah's handmaid or slave, Hagar, to come in unto him. And from their union begat Ishmael. Now, Ishmael is commonly thought of as the ancestor of the Arabic tribes, of many of the Arabic tribes. Reason why that's so important is because nowadays, most of the nation of Israel's conflicts and troubles have to deal with the Arabic tribes. So that was another thing, that if Abraham had stayed with faith, because that's really what's the basis of what the promise was. If you have faith in what I tell you, this is God saying it, if you have faith in what I'm telling you to do, then you are going to be blessed. But you have to have faith that I will do exactly what I say I will do. And some saints almost are in the same way. Because we don't believe that God's going to help us in a certain way, and then we do it our own way, and we mess things up. We destroy things. We think that we're doing the job that God wants us to do, but then we don't really believe that God can actually do it. And we end up being led by our own desires. And we're thinking, okay, well, I did this, so it should work. But it just so seems that every time we say that it should work, and I've went through all of the lines and every last word, fine print, whatever, it still failed. And you wonder why. It didn't solve the problem as you have thought, because you aren't God. And sometimes we do lose our faith in extenuating circumstances. Among those things, Abraham also twice went into a particular country to avoid the ravages of famine. And what did he do? He told a half-truth. And the reason why it becomes a lie is because the intent of the half-truth was to deceive the king of that particular country, so that the king would not take Sarah into his harem and also kill Abraham as a result. God had to step into it and prevent the kings of the Philistines and the king of Egypt from taking Sarah into their harems or as their wives. But again, Abraham is called a man of faith. He is father of the faithful, because overall, he did things that we would have to say most of us, if not all of us, would not have done. We would not have staked our very existence upon a promise that doesn't seem to be so concrete, that you're going to go to a land that will be in your inheritance for your descendants, when he didn't have a descendant. Maybe he thought that Lot might end up being the descendant, but that wasn't to be the case. That's why Lot was sent away. That's why Ishmael was sent away. The thing here, saints of God, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on because we're going to deal with Isaac and Jacob as well. Isaac did the same thing. And the only reason why they caught Isaac in his lie regarding Rebekah as his sister was they saw Isaac sporting or essentially flirting. You say he was flirting with Rebekah. And no one flirts, at least no one tried to flirt with their sister. It's a different behavior. We don't talk about this very much, but these are also examples of sin. Maybe not on the idea of killing someone, slaying someone, hurting someone, but it still showed a lack of faith in God. Of course, Abraham made up for it in his part, as he was told to sacrifice his son and followed it almost to the very end. And God had to stop him. I know that you won't even withhold your son from me. And there came, of course, the proverbial ram in the bush. That's where that proverb comes from, what the ram in the bush. But with all that, it still remains that as good as Abraham was, as good as Isaac was, as much as they depended upon God himself to lead, guide, give them encouragement, and fulfill his promises, there were times where their doubts either caused future recriminations or almost caused a mistake by those who had interacted with them. So even when the promise is there and God makes the promise, we can see even right now, many saints are getting tired of waiting for the Lord to come. They're tired of the pie in the sky type of thing. How come I can't get my blessings now? Which is why many fall for the prosperity message, because they feel that the saint should be prosperous. He should be well-to-do. He should have more than others because we're king's kids, when that was never really prophesied or preached in the Bible. In fact, Jesus declared this, that it would be harder for a man to go through, or a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it would be, actually put it this way, it would be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Whatever the eye of a needle was, it would be easier for that camel to do so than for a rich man to enter heaven. Yet and still, Abraham was rich. He was rich by the grace of God. So he did essentially follow God, and his riches did not stop him from following God. But again, all it takes is one sin, one indiscretion, one moment of unfaithfulness. As Adam and Eve could tell you, one moment could unravel all the good that has been done. So sometimes the sin that is committed is not the overt sin, attacking someone, belittling someone, killing someone, but it's just the idea of losing faith. Saints of God, be sure that you keep your faith and don't lose it. God bless you.